Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory in the home and traditional lands of the Ojibwe, Cree, Dakota people, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake County First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon. Introducing the panel members, to my left, Carrie Linkletter, and to her left is Linda McFadden. Our assessor from the city of Winnipeg is Mr. Darren Duchesne. Sorry. That's okay. Duchesne. Okay. And our recording secretary is Stephen Lunn. We'll be hearing an application for revision of the assessment roll according to the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and we will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence by market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then it will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this afternoon. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board order or decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. This afternoon we have items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I ask our secretary to swear in Mr. Duchesne, and might as well swear in Diane Gentlemen.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Darren Charles Duchamp.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. And this applicant, please state your full name.
Diane Schimpelman.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. And Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. The first item that we have on the docket is number 179 Valentine Avenue, unit number 2. Mr. Assessor, you can take us through this property.
Okay, thank you. The roll number is 130-628-30200. The address is 200-179 Valentine. For the roll year 2023, with a reference date of April 1st, 2021, the assessed value is $372,000. Parcel use is a commercial condo. The actual year built is 1904. The effective year built is 1960. I do have a recommendation for this value. Did you, Mr. Chair, want me to work through this or just
You can state what the recommendation is.
Okay. I'd like to make a recommendation of $328,000. $328,000.
Okay. Ms. Schindelman, are you in agreement with that?
No, we're not in agreement.
All right. So we'll go back to you and continue on.
Okay. On page 2 of my brief, at the top of page 2, we see a Google Street View dated May 2019 facing the subject. The bottom of page 2 is approaching the subject on Valentine. On the top of page 3, we have an aerial photo above the subject. And at the bottom of page 4, an aerial photo facing the subject. On page 4 are requests for income information and subject property leases. On page 5 is the market income stream summary. So this I've revised according to my recommendations. After review, adjustments were made to decrease the rental rate and increase the cap rate based on the challenges of parking, access, and to the subject and the condo board challenges. So the original rent was $14.66 per square foot.
Mr. Duchesne, do you have a revised for us or not?
I do not.
No.
I
Okay. So
have here.
we'll have to go back to the original then and just alter our figures. So
Okay.
bear with us, okay?
Sorry, you said the original rent was $14.66, but I think it says $10.66 on it. On the worksheet, am I looking at the right one?
It's the second one, Linda. It's 179 Bannatyne.
Oh, okay.
Wait, okay.
Sorry.
What happened was there was our secretary just informed me that there was a 15-1 on the
Okay,
first one.
sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. We'll let you catch up there.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to wait.
And Mr. Duchesne, you may continue.
Okay. The original rental was at $14.66 per square foot with a potential income of $29,041. I'm proposing a rental rate of $14.18 per square foot with a potential income of $28,091. The vacancy remains the same at 6%. The shortfall remains the same at $7 per square foot. The expenses remain the same at 3%. The original cap rate, 6.90%. I've adjusted that to 7.55%. The original market value was $372,000, and the change market value now rounded is $328,000.
Very good. I thank you. Gentlemen, questions of the assessor?
Oh, I'm on page 9.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to make
All
sure
right.
everyone
Okay.
was able to get that.
Okay. Continue.
On page 6 are my comparables. All my comparables are from the same neighborhood as the subject, the Exchange District. The comparables all have a corner influence, the same as the subject. The comparables have medium traffic influence, same as the subject, except for 136 Market, which is considered light traffic. The comparable leases area range from 1,027 square feet to 3,500 square feet. The subject is 1,981. The comparables at 167 Lombard have the same effective age as the subject, 1960. While 177 Lombard and 136 Market are younger. The comparable rents range from $12.50 to $21 per square foot. My recommended is $14.18. I would say the comparable at 665, 167 Lombard would be the most comparable indicator. It has the similar land factors in the same area and it's the closest in terms of the square footage to the subject. Although it is on the 6th floor and would be considered less desirable with the subject being on the ground floor. On page 7 are cap rate information. Page 8, information on our excerpts. Pages 9 through 14 are the return income and expense questionnaires provided by the appellant. And that would conclude my presentation for now.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Schindelman, questions of the assessor?
Yes, thank you. On page 6 of the assessor's comparables, he noted that the most comparable location was 665 167 Lombard with rent of $13.69, with suggesting that the size is similar and the location is similar. However, it's on the 6th floor. Would that 6th floor, would that have access by elevator?
I don't know for certain if that one has access by elevator.
You don't know. And would it be accessible space? I mean, for wheelchairs, walkers, that kinds of things.
Yes, I do not know if it would be accessible for wheelchairs.
I don't know that. And the rent at $13.69, you suggested it was most comparable. Could you see that the rent for the subject maybe should be similar to the $13.69?
Well, I indicated that I did, in my adjustments, have a recommended amount of $14.18.
Right.
And I indicated that that particular premise, 665 Wood, 67 Lombard, would be less desirable being on the 6th floor as opposed to the subject on the main floor. That's, I guess, the difference in the value.
Would you say that your comparables are all office space?
Yes, I would agree that's true.
Different from the subject.
True, it was hard to find
That's right.
proper comparables for commercial condos
I agree.
in this area.
Yeah, I totally agree. Would office space right across from the Richardson building and 201 Portage and pretty much Portage and Main, would that be desirable space for an office use?
I would agree that would be desirable space for office uses.
Okay. Do you know the shapes of any of these spaces? Are they long and narrow like the subject, or would they be more square, probably like an office type?
I'm not familiar with their spaces.
Okay. And they're not condos, correct?
Correct.
Okay. On page 7, the cap rate analysis, can you tell me which property type you used for this?
I didn't pick a particular property type. The cap rate is a result of our modeling group.
Okay.
So
So
it doesn't come from a particular type. It wouldn't fit into any of these particular types in a commercial condo.
it wouldn't fit into any of these types. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Linkletter?
Yes, Mr. Ducharme.
Hi.
Did you have a chance to inspect this property at all?
The subject property?
Yes.
No, I mean, I walked, not the interior, no, I walked by the exterior.
Okay. Do you have any notes as to when it was last inspected?
I am not aware of when it was last inspected.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
Did you mention an NOI, revised NOI, when you went through your room?
Oh, I may have missed that. Sorry if I did. My change.
28,081, 91?
That's
No.
the GPR.
No. My adjusted net operating income was $24,781.
Thank you very much. We don't have any calculators today. We don't have any calculators today.
Oh, yes, we do.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
All right.
I was feeling quite anxious here because I had no calculator. Okay.
Mr. Duchesne, your original cap rate was 6.9, okay, and you went to 7.55?
Yes.
Okay. And the reasoning behind that?
I agree with you, Collins, in terms of some of the challenges that this subject faces in terms of lack of or minimal parking due to the bike lanes that have been installed. Access to the subject, it's a one-way street, not from Main, but from Waterfront. And this subject has some condo board challenges that limits the subjects.
So the original cap rate, computer generated at 6.9.
That's correct.
Okay. So obviously you overrid, wrote it.
Yes, I adjusted.
Okay.
I made some changes to adjust, yes.
So from the original one to, I'm just looking at the NOI, it's dropped about $1,000.
Yes,
To your
friends, yes.
Okay. All right. I thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Gentleman, your presentation.
Thank you. On page 1 of my brief, I'm just describing a little bit about the subject. It is unusual. It's a commercial condominium. There would be very few of them in Winnipeg. We have 5 of them in this particular location. It is located on the east side of Main Street, and I have a build date of 1895. Perhaps the 1904 was, another renovation or something, but I mean, it doesn't make much of a difference at that point, at that age. As the assessor said, it is on Banatang Avenue. It's a one-way street going east to west, so traffic to go by the site wouldn't be coming down Main Street and turning onto the street, onto Banatang. They would have to come from like the lesser busy street, Waterfront, and turn left to get up, to go past the subject. The space, as you can see on page 3 of my brief, is very long and very narrow. It has very small amount of frontage. It is not wheelchair accessible. There's 4 or 5 little steps to get into the unit. And as the assessor mentioned, there is a lack of customer parking, and signage is very difficult to see even from the sidewalk. Windows are very small, so there is not a lot of view for customers inside or from outside to see in, and this all increases the risk for this property. The condo board has been, over the years that we've been managing this property, has been very difficult to deal with. They have a specific idea of who they want in those in those spaces, and we've had trouble leasing these spaces in the past. Sometimes we propose a lease and they turn it down. The other thing that the condo situation presents is a common element. So the units on the main floor are required to pay their share of the common element, which in this case is 18% of all the building costs. But it turns out that many of the building renovations and maintenance is done for the other 102 residential units, and little is done on the main floor for these tenants. So they have to pay their share, but yet they're not getting the benefit of the maintenance. And the maintenance done on the condos on the main floor does not trickle back up to the residents. They do not pay any share of that. So this makes leasing difficult because our ability to achieve a rental rate has to be adjusted with this higher common area payment required from any tenant that goes there. Another example on page 2 is we had a tenant in one unit and they wanted to open the wall to the unit beside it and make a bigger space, but that was voted down by the condo board. So evidently that space that they did want to add to theirs by opening up the unit has been vacant for many, many years. It's not the subject site, but it is one of the units right over. So that's just an example of how the condo board affects the operation of these units. Then page 3 shows again the picture of the unit, the shape of it. Page 4 is our market valuation. We used a rent of $13 as a net rent. The actual rent on the subject is $15.50 gross. They have a base year, which I'll explain next. And so their net rent is really around a little bit more than $9. I used 13 because their lease was signed in 2015. So in order to adjust up to 2021, I did increase the rent to 13. That, again, would be the most that we could get for this unit in that year. I did use a 6% vacancy in agreement with the assessment department and the $750 shortfall. We have non-recoverable and other of 5% and 2%. Again, this is something that was adjusted by the assessment department to just a straight 3%. However, there is still non-recoverable costs that wouldn't be covered off by the 3%. So we've used the 5 and 2, which was always in place for many years before that. The net operating income comes to $21,620, and then we cap this at 7.75 for all the same reasons that the assessor changed his cap rate. But because at 775 we get to a value of 279,000, which is a value we think would be the highest it would sell. That's about $145 a square foot, I believe. I'll just quickly calculate that. 279. That's $140 a square foot. We actually think it would probably not sell for more like about 125, but we're at about 140. That would be the most that this unit would sell for. We would happily take 140, but probably even 125 per square foot. Page 5 shows our rent comparables. Again, I used the neighboring tenant in the same place. The square footage is obviously not at all comparable, but this was it had a gross rent of $13. The subject with the lease of 2015 had a gross rent of $15.50, which equates to a net rent after base year of $923. And we had 2 comparables on Princess Street, which is just across Main Street, one at 4,000 feet, which again, it was very difficult to find comparables, as like the assessor said, for this. A January 2017 lease at $660 net. So if we adjusted that for the size, the rent would go up a little bit. And 74 Princess, 3,500 feet at $12 gross. 1549 Grant is not at all in the same area, but they have the same tenant is a tenant in the Exchange District with Corrientes, and I would imagine that their rent would be in around the same or less. So just to explain again the base year, so the tenant lease rent is $15.50. Their base year was 2015, so the common area and taxes that was charged in that year is deducted from the 1550, which it was $6.27, and so their net rent is $9.23. So every year they get that reduction of $6.27, and then they only pay the difference in rent and in taxes and common area, in addition to the 1550. So in fact, their net rent is arguably less than $13, their net rent. We talked about the vacancy and the shortfall already. I did describe the non-recoverable. This is something that maybe in a particular year there isn't a non-recoverable, but over the life of the lease, there would be years of non-recoverables. And so in order to value the property in the market, we would have to take off these non-recoverables of 5% and 2%. That's what a purchaser would do in the market. And if we don't take that off, the value is, it's overvalued. So the capitalization rate, I agree with the assessor, is very difficult to figure it out. How we came to this is the situation of the condo, the large number of residential condominium units above with a large say in how we operate this property, the poorly drawn condo declaration, which doesn't give the main floor very much pull or say, I guess, complaints from the condo board and residents, not allowing us to lease to certain tenants, and it affects and impedes the ability for the tenants to succeed. The tenants on the main floor have to pay the high condo fees and they get no benefit. We talked about, as did the assessor, with the parking availability and the age of the building. And based on the assessment department range of cap rates, 3.5% to 10.5% for retail properties, this property would be at the high end of the range because of the situation. We adjusted the cap rate to 7.75 with an actual rent of $9.23. That would be more market in this case. If we look at page 8, I've also included a picture of the subject. Just to reiterate, the customers have to drive from east to west down Bannatyne to access the subject, and they would have to come down Lombard or Market in order to get to this street, and they would drive right by the assessor's comparables first, so maybe they would be more desirable to stop in over there. On page 9 of our brief is the financial statement for 2020. I want to point out one adjustment. The utilities on this statement compared to the utilities on the statement we sent in for our mailer. Unfortunately, when I was doing this brief, I discovered an error. The utilities are separately metered by tenant. When this financial statement for the mailer was done, the utilities were allocated by square footage, but that's not the case. The actual utilities for this tenant is $10,990 because it is separately metered to that space. So the utilities in the mailer brief were understated by about $7,000. So this financial statement comes down to a net earning of 26, which is about the average for each year. And as my brief shows, I have a net operating income showing 21, which is in that range. On page 10 is just a little bit more evidence talking about the parking, but we all agree that it is challenging in this area of the subject. Page 11, again, is talking about the parking and the one-way streets and how this is challenging, as well as page 12. And I believe that's everything.
Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman. Mr. Duchesne, questions of the applicant?
We have one on page 5. You mentioned it's a $13 net, or effectively a $9.23, I believe.
Yes.
Then when I look at my brief, page 14 of rent roll, rent is indicating $2,770.10. That would make a potential income of $33,241.20. If I divide that by the square foot 1981, I come up with the 1678 square foot net. As we see, there's recoveries here, so I'm trying to understand. To me, this appears that it should be a net rent according to the rent roll submitted on page 14 of my brief.
No, that rent is correct. But what happened if you see on page 13 of your brief, the utilities are wrong on this. And so if we put the $10,990 in because I did figure this out when I was doing my brief, then you would see that the non-recoverable portion would show up, because we have to show the gross rent in property rental revenue. So the 33 is gross. If we take away, I'll just do it. If we take out the $3,095 in utilities and we put in the $10,990, as I explained in my brief.
We may need to be sure our internet just went down, so I need to confirm everything's still running. If we can take a short recess, Mr. Chair.
All right. Let's take 5 to 10, because the internet went down.
5 minutes, just to make sure.
Okay. Okay, we'll call a hearing back to order. Mr. Zimmerman, I think you were doing your presentation, so you may continue.
Thank you. So I'll just, on the assessor's page 13, I'll just correct it to what is actually correct. So if everybody goes to page 13, if we take the utilities of $3,095.12, if we take that away and replace it with $10,990, we would get recoverable expenses a total of $28,639. And then below the number 20,762.21 would become 28,656.52 cents. And then our net earnings would end up at 26,924.71 cents. And you can see that amount is less than the 33,000 because we have non-recoverables and we have the base year. So the property rental revenue of 33,000 is brought down to 26,924, and that is the true net earnings because there's of this error on the utilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions?
Thank you. Ms. Linkletter?
Is this building currently vacant?
The subject is not vacant. It is leased.
It is leased.
Correct.
And how long is it leased? And how long is the lease for?
I don't think I brought that, but
We got till
Darren, do you have that?
We have an ending date of October 31st, 2025.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, that makes sense because it was a renewal in 2015. That makes sense.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. McFadden?
I have no further questions. Thank you.
I have no further questions either, so either party wants summation? Mr. Duchesne? Okay, Ms. Gentleman?
I just wanted to mention just one sort of clarifying issue. We really agree for the most part on everything, but just the rent of, I would like to see the rent at the $13 and the cap rate I would like to see at $7.75, but an adjustment in rent is important.
All right, I thank you for your presentation and results very soon. So you are free to go, and you will get results very quick.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Darren.
Okay. Mr. Reimer, your timing is impeccable. As soon as Diane leaves, gets all her stuff, we'll have you come forward and be affirmed.
Thanks very much. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Applicant, please state your full name. Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
You are no stranger here, Mr. Reimer.
Indeed.
So, Mr. Duchesne, he has 3 properties. We'll deal with them in order. And so we'll go to 1015 Wilkes Avenue.
Okay, thank you. The roll number is 120-975-25600. The address is 1015 Wilkes Avenue. For the roll year 2023, with a reference date of April 1st, 2021, the assessed value is $607,000. The parcel use is commercial condo. The actual year built is 2004. The effective year built as well is 2004. I do have a recommendation. I would like to recommend a value of $462,000.
462.
Yes.
Mr. Reimer?
We're closer, but I think we'd like to proceed.
All right. Mr. Duchesne, continue with your presentation.
On the top of page 2 is a May 2021 Google Street View approaching the subject on Wilkes. The bottom of page 2, we're in front of the subject on Wilkes. On page 3, we're passing the subject on Wilkes Avenue. The bottom of page 3 is an overhead aerial view of the subject. Page 4, the request for income information and subject property leases. Page 5 are a list of my comparables. I'm not going to go through all of these. I would like to bring your attention to a few of them. I have the comparable on 2310 Pembina. This one is in the same region, Fort Garry, as the subject. It has a bus route, same as the subject. It's heavy traffic, although the subject has medium. It has 2,000 square feet, so the subject's 1,978. It's older by 6 years with a rent of $16.94. I'd like to bring your attention to 75 Spearfield, also the same region as the subject, Region 8. It as well is 2,000 square feet, well, as the previous comparable, similar to the subject, 1,978. It as well has a bus route and medium traffic similar to the subject. It's 4 years older than the subject, and the rental rate is $16.75. 104 Spearfield as well is in the same region, Fort Garry. It as well has a bus route medium traffic influence, same as subject, is a little larger at 2,400 square feet. It is younger by 2 years, and the rental rate is $22. So those are the, to me, more the comparable ones to the subject. Overall, the average of these comparables is $1,803 for a rent, and a medium of $17 per square foot for rent. On page 6 is the market income summary report. I've adjusted that. I'd like to go through that now to my recommendation. The original rental rate was $1,803 with a potential income of $35,663. So I've adjusted the rental income down to $15.50, leaving a potential income of $30,659. The vacancy remains the same at 6%. The shortfall remains the same at $8 per square foot. The expenses remain the same at 3%. The original net operating income was $31,568. With my adjustments, the operating income is now $27,005. The original cap rate was 5.2%. I've adjusted that to 5.85%. The original market value was $607,000, and the new recommended value is $462,000, rounded. Page 7 of the cap rates studies. Page 8, Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And pages 9 through 14 are copies of the income and expense that be returned by the applicant. That would conclude my presentation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Reimer, questions of the assessor?
Just a couple of things, and thank you, Mr. Descharmes, for the recommendation. We're a lot closer. There's only 2 issues, Mr. Chairman, well, 3 actually, but we're certainly much closer now than initially. Mr. Descharmes, we are very close on the rent, so I'm not going to belabor this, but if I could ask you initially to turn to your page 5, please, which is the rent comparables.
Yes.
Okay. We can agree that the reference date is April 1 of 2021.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned some of the comparables. The 2310 Pembina, that's of course directly, that's fronting Pembina Highway, just that would be based on the 2300 address, that's going to be just south of Pembina Village Mall, correct? In that area?
I'm not sure if I believe that sounds about right. I would defer to you on that.
Okay, but fair enough. Now, I actually had identified your first comparable, 1150 Waverly. So just to take a half step back, this unit or this building in which these units are located, it's at 1015 Wilkes. So that's the, looking at your map, it's where Wilkes and basically it's where Victor Lewis crosses Sterling Line, and then you're heading north and west, and that's the area that we're in here with the subject, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, 1150 Waverly, which is your rent comparable number 1, that's also in this very same region, and in fact, that would be closer to the subject, correct?
It is in the same region. Yeah, I'm not sure if it would be closer. I would defer to you.
I'd suggest it would be, rather than quite a ways down Pembina.
Yeah.
And that was a February 2020 lease, as I read it, at $15, correct?
Correct.
And so that, with that comparable, given that it's only roughly a year and a month away from the reference date and it's the same region, would we agree that that's also a good comparable?
I included it. I didn't highlight it because of the square footage area of $2,880, significantly larger than the subject, and I think you agree generally larger premises would generally attract lower rent.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with that. But we can agree that, I mean, this is so this one's roughly, I'm going to use round figures. This one's about 2,000 feet. That one's about 2,900. But in terms of the reference or the lease date and in terms of the area, we are closer to both the reference date and the subject.
Closer to the reference date subject, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But not closer to the square.
Understood. I'm not going to belabor that further because of the recommendation. As I say, we're pretty close. Now, the only one other question regarding the rental rate. Could I ask you to turn to your page 9, please? And I don't believe there's any dispute on this, but we can agree that the rent income in place for the subject for this exact unit is $29,428.
Yes.
And then if we turn to your page 11, so 2 more pages over, on this rent roll, this is a December 2020 lease at that lease rate, correct?
Yes.
It's the lease start. So that is even closer still than your comparables to the reference date, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Last question. And again, appreciate the recommendation you made because you kind of take.
Rebuttal that a bit? This, or?
Oh, certainly. Mr. Chairman, I've got one more question. If you have knowledge, Mr. Ducharme, about something about the question I've just asked, then I would do that.
Continue with your question.
So one last question. No, correct me if I'm wrong. The revised capitalization rate you're suggesting is 5.85%.
Yes.
Okay, so if we turn to your page 7, and fully appreciate it, it hasn't been stated in this hearing, but I believe you stated in the previous hearing, these commercial condos don't fit neatly into any of these categories that the city of Winnipeg's got for their cap rates. I understand all that. But the closest, I'd suggest to you, Mr. Ducharme, the closest sort of indicator we've got would be under the office segment, which is the first set of 4 rows in that chart. And we'd be under the suburban B office space, correct? As far as the closest sort of category, being a suburban office?
Correct.
And that rate range was between 5.6 and 6.9. Really the question is, Mr. Ducharme, given that range and given especially the location of this, sort of north of Sterling Lion, because of course now Wilkes dead ends, right, by the underpass. Is it a case where perhaps the capitalization rate, given the lack of exposure in the location, might be something closer to the upper end of the range rather than the lower?
I couldn't answer that in the sense that it's sort of derived from the modeling group.
Fair enough. Okay. My questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get into your Mr. Du shortly. Ms. Linklater, questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
I have no question.
Mr. Duchesne, do you have rebuttal?
Oh, I just wanted to,
Is it just verbally? Or is there a presentation?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Reimer is referring, I guess, to what the tenant was paying for rent, right?
I did ask that question. Indeed, yeah.
I don't know if you're really aware there's a non-arm's length relationship between the owner and the tenant.
Looking at the email address, so Mr. Chairman, I'm on Mr. Ducharme's brief on page 12. Looking at the email address, I'm going to be inclined to agree with that. Indeed. So the quick answer is no, I hadn't noticed that, and yes, I agree.
Anything further?
No.
Mr. Reimer, your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, apologies, I'm just trying to log in here so I can get to my... There are, based on Mr. Ducharme's recommendation, the issues I should say have narrowed significantly. Can I ask the board and Mr. Ducharme to just turn to page 14 of my main brief for a second? 14? It should be at the top of that page, an income approach summary. Everybody's there? So the potential rent now that Mr. Ducharme has suggested in his recommendation and our potential rent are actually very close. I am agreeing with Mr. Ducharme based on the review of the INE and the email address. I'm agreeing it certainly looks like that's a lease that is I don't know if I'd call it non-arm's length, but between related parties. Non-arm's length is a bit of a loaded term for income tax purposes, but I'm suggesting it's related. So I'm asking the board to note that. As far as the market rent then goes, we're suggesting $14.88, and the rental comparables, if we go 2 pages back to my page 12, the rental comparables we've got are listed there. They're on Wilkes, Lorimer, Waverly, and Squarefield with an average of $12.81 and a median of 13. Now the Wilkes, I'm going to caution the board about something. one aspect of this, but I do believe the rental comps are appropriate. The 3 properties on Wilkes, it's classified as a flex industrial warehouse located close to the subject. In these flex industrial warehouses, and I certainly spent some time actually working in a situation like that, there are certainly many tenants that have 100% build out. So notwithstanding that it's classified as an industrial building, it's used entirely as 100% office space, and that's actually becoming more common. So the 3, but I wanted to be fair on this, the 3 comparables on Wilkes, the building itself is classified as industrial. The tenancies though are amount to office tenancies within, with the build out in that building. The property on Lorimer is office, as is the property on Waverly Street, and the property at Scurfield, the last 3, I actually think that's one of the same properties that Mr. Ducharme has in his evidence. So it is the very same building. I'll just make very sure here. It is actually the same building as Mr. Ducharme's comparable number 4. So we've actually, to the extent that what I tried to do is stay within the same geographical area. As I say, the rental rate range there indicated in my chart is between $10 a foot and $15.50 a foot. And we do believe, based on the 1488 is well within that range, and we're asking the board to consider that. Again, please put the weight you deem appropriate on the actual lease rate, given Mr. Ducharme's comments. So then going back to our page 14, there are 2 remaining issues, and I understand full well that the board has heard one of these issues many, many times over. It relates to non-recoverable. The non-recoverable expense study that we've submitted in support of our submission today, I just want to highlight a couple of things. If the board wishes to open it and follow along, they can, but I'm not sure it's necessary because I'm going to be very, very succinct in this. We've said repeatedly in the past that the intent, and to be clear, I've been in this industry many, many years. It's actually over 25 years now. And when this expense and when the income approach was sort of really getting established, the assessor parameters, the assessment guidelines that were published at the time said very, very clearly, this is even with net leases, triple net leases, there are still going to be expenses that are not recovered. That is the entire, I'd suggest very strongly, that's the entire purpose of this non-recoverable expense allowance all along. Management fees, and we've been very clear on this. It came to be known as the management allowance. That has to do with prudent, competent management and what that entails as it relates to non-recoverable expenses. It does not relate to management fees and we're clear on this in our submission, management fees are almost always recovered from tenants on a net lease basis. There's no nexus between that though and the allowance we're asking for. If you choose to look at it again, the SAMA, the Saskatchewan Municipal Assessor, and the MPAC, the Ontario Provincial Assessor, have been very clear. You've got to take these allowances into account. Appraisal theory is very clear. You have to account for these expenses that are typically not recovered. So in our study, we identify four really, but 3 primary types of expenses that would fall squarely within this allowance in our submission. One of them, the most significant of which, is leasing commissions. Leasing commissions, I can say categorically, are not recovered from tenants under any circumstances. And they're significant. Typically, they will make up the bulk of the non-recoverable expenses in any given year. You also have professional fees, which is also an annual expense, typically at less costly than leasing commissions. Asset management fees they're not all that common. They can come up, but certainly they're less common than leasing commissions and professional fees, and advertising marketing expenses, which we've also included. So when we looked at that, I have for the board's reference put in an updated chart based on the stabilized review of the properties over a 5-year period now, and the chart's in there for the board's reference. I'm just going to state this, that the the average rate, the average non-recoverable expenses that we calculate from that chart are actually a little over 6.5% and with a median of 6%. So we believe that 5% remains entirely appropriate. However, having said all of that, this is something that obviously we've been at this for a few years now. If the board, and the department actually has changed from the 2023 assessment, they've actually somewhat modified the approach. Typically what I've seen is what we call the non-recoverable expenses now been put back to 1%. So now we're down to a difference of our 5% versus the department's 1%. Nobody's disputing that what's historically been known as the structural or other reserve at 2%, that's not under debate. But the key, if the board is not inclined to, or not comfortable with the application of the 5% rate, this has a direct mathematical impact on our capitalization rate request. And again, I'm going back to the materials now, and this is updated in the new materials. I've prepared an example in the non-recoverable expense study using 3 different assumptions. The first assumption is full 5% allowance. Okay, great. That's what we're suggesting in our valuation. But the second assumption, and this has more application for the 2020 assessment cycle, if you reduce the non-recoverable expense from 5 to 0, what the effect is, everything else being the same, every component of the valuation being the same, the sale price being exactly the same, the mathematical effect is to increase the implied capitalization rate by roughly 40 points. Sometimes a bit higher, sometimes a bit lower, but it's 40 points. In the very similar vein, if you reduce the non-recoverable expense from 5% to 1%, the mathematical, and this is pure math, using the very same valuation parameters, the same sale price, the mathematical effect of that is to increase the capitalization rate by roughly 30 points. Where this all ties in is our office capitalization, in fact, all of our capitalization rate studies for the property class known as other, which is industrial, commercial, not apartments, but those types of properties. Our capitalization rate study explicitly includes the 5%. So I'd suggest, with great respect, Mr. Chairman, if the board needs to pick one, it's one or the other. If the board is inclined to go with the 1%, which seems to be something that has been happening, then please consider this my request to increase our capitalization rate request by, and I'm rounding it to 25 points, because our capitalization rate document that I'm going to be submitting for this hearing as well, and you'll see in there, we've included the full 5%. That's how our capitalization rate request is framed. But that request is entirely different if you assume just a reduction to 1% in the non-recoverable. So with that all in mind, I'd suggest, Mr. Chairman, I am requesting that the non-recoverable expense allowance of 5% that had been used prior to 2020 is entirely appropriate, is entirely justifiable, and in fact represents these non-recoverable expenses fairly. But in the alternative, if the board is inclined to use the 1%, my cap rate request goes up by 25 points. So all of that, as far as the non-recoverable study, that's all. And if the board wants to write this down, it's all on pages, I think it starts at page 12. It does. It starts at page 12, 12, 13, 14, and 15 provides the examples I just gave you, if you wanted to take a look at it. So in this case then, and I'd ask all of those comments obviously to be carried forward. I don't think anybody here wants to hear me run that through another time this afternoon. So then if you move on to the remaining issue, it's capitalization rate. I'm back in my brief now, at main brief that is on page 14. So our capitalization rate with the inclusion of the 5%, the rate request we have is 6.5%, which is how we come in at the 381,000 value. So now, I am going to turn to the Altus office capitalization rate that was submitted, study that was submitted for the purposes of this hearing. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to go through some very high level points relating to the conditions under which this property is operating as of April 1st, 2021. In that study, If I could ask the board members and Mr. Deschamps to turn to page 8. The environment, and the boards I'm sure heard this and is going to sort of be reminded of this in the next few months. We were, of course, in a pandemic, and the pandemic hit 3 sectors disproportionately. The hospitality sector was absolutely, in my opinion, was absolutely decimated. The retail sector was profoundly impacted, and the office sector, which is what we're talking about here, was also very much affected. So when I look at page 8, we talk about in the first paragraph that the return, it's this whole notion of it became a necessity, but it certainly became a situation where work from home by necessity was implemented to a very large extent. And as companies realized that, hey, this work from home model is working in a lot of cases a lot better than we thought. Hey, we don't need as much office space if people are working from home. This is all going to start to make economic sense. In the first paragraph, there's a note there that the success of the work from home model resulted in a higher percentage of employees wanting to not return to the 5-day work week in the office and remain working from home or have a hybrid model. Avis and Young reported that 67% of employees want to work in a manner that's more balanced, which is typically the hybrid model. Now, moving down, I want to go to the key assumption survey. And again, I'm all of the previous stuff pre-pandemic, the board has, I'm sure, seen our office cap study, and that remains the same. But it's what happened in the intervening period between the previous reference date and this reference date, right in the midst of the pandemic. If you turn to page 9 of our study, Altus Group had completed a key assumption survey, and these were the most prudent and sophisticated investors in Canada. So this was a group that knew exactly what the landscape looked like because they're invested in this office market landscape. And on page 8, they talk about most of them were assuming that there would be higher tenant incentives. At the bottom of page 9, one of the key points or the key indicators was that 50% of respondents expected office tenants to downsize their space in the future, and that made perfect sense based on everything that had led up to that date and the success of the work from home model. So in that context, now I'm moving to page 10. Actually, I'm going to go to page. I'm not going to belabor that part of it, but if we go then to the bottom of page 11 and page 12, these respondents believed, and they should certainly know, they're the investors in this sector, that office cap rates would increase in 2021. There's a percentage of those expecting an increase that percentage actually rose. The survey was conducted in 2 phases. One was in June of 2020, sort of as the pandemic was really becoming entrenched, and then again in November 2020 when the pandemic had been basically in place since March for a period of 9 months, give or take. And these respondents said that they thought cap rates for better quality assets would rise between 25 and 50 basis points, and for low quality assets, 50 to 75 basis points. So there was an exceptional amount of uncertainty because of all of these factors that were brought upon by the pandemic. The uncertainty, though, in the office sector, what started as a very uncertain and sort of a lot of companies were feeling their way through this. Do we have the infrastructure to support work from home? What do we need to do? And how can we make this work? Because we have to deal with it right now. They had no choice with mandated shutdowns and such. A lot of them certainly seemed to find that they were getting pretty good at it. The infrastructure was there, the productivity was there, and the investor sentiments here reflect the fact that they perceived these changes to be. It wouldn't be entirely everybody work from home all the time, and that's not suggested, and that certainly wouldn't be the case. But it was a fundamental shift to something closer to the hybrid model, which in turn, when you incorporate that with sort of the flexible workspace business model, that's when they started to realize we can reduce our footprint, pay a little bit less in our operating costs for our space, and that would be permanent. And that's why a lot of the investors were assuming these changes are coming, they're not going away, and both the reductions in space and the corresponding increase in risk and the perception that cap rates would increase, that's how all that tied in. So with that in mind, and now I'm going to jump to page 16. And at page 16, I'm going to focus, there's 3 comparables in the chart on that page. There's 383 Dover Court, 433 Main, and 870 Portage. In my opinion, the Dover Court is also in the Fort Garry area. It's the industrial segment just to the south of the subject in that same general area. And that property traded for a cap rate of 7.23%. And again, I stress and if you just want to reference the page number, the calculation of that cap rate is shown on page 20, and it does include the 5% non-recoverable. So again, if one reduces or eliminates it, our cap rate request goes up. In any event, Dover Court, the capitalization rate we calculate, as shown on page 20, is 7.23%. So recall that I asked Mr. Ducharme in terms of the capitalization rate range that the city has, and his answer was forthright. These are sort of model-driven rates, and the revised rate was within, I should say, the CAMA model-driven ranges. But I'm suggesting, with all of the conditions that were in place as of the reference date and what was perceived to be the lasting impacts of the pandemic, when you look at the Dover Court transaction, it's a bigger building. It's 10,400 feet, no question. That's a larger asset, and that may or may not have an impact on it. But this is a good quality office building in the same area. We're not asking for 7.23%. We are asking, as set forth in page 14 of our brief, for 6.50%, which we believe is entirely fair and certainly consistent with the indicators. So with all those comments in mind, I then request that the assessment for this unit be reduced to $381,000 based on the application of the rent of $1,488, the inclusion of the 5% non-recoverable, and a cap rate of 6.5%. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ducharme, questions of the applicant?
Yes, we have one question, I guess. On page 12, with the comparables listed there.
So the main brief now, right?
Sorry?
The main brief.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Page 12,
Yep. Yep.
I guess I'm just curious why there's no addresses listed.
The addresses, we have to maintain client confidentiality. And to be clear, Mr. Ducharme, I'll say this very, very clearly. I encourage you to send emails, and we are happy to provide the department with the addresses, but we can't disclose them on the public record. So very good question.
That's all I have for questions.
Thank you, Heather.
No questions.
Ms. McFadden?
No question.
You're worried I'm going to start talking about non-recoverable again, aren't you?
No, that's further for us. I don't think I have any further questions. So either party wants summation?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll go to the next property, which is 77 Eppington and Unit 101. Mr. Ducharme.
Okay. Okay, the roll number is 120-928-40100. The address is 10177 Edmonton Street. For the roll year 2023, with a reference date of April 1st, 2021, the assessed value is $359,000. The parcel use is a commercial condo. The actual year built is 1986. We have an effective year built as well, 1986. And I do have a recommendation for this property as well for $315,000.
315. Mr. Reimer?
Appreciate Mr. Ducharme's recommendation. I think we'll proceed.
On the top of page 2, we see a Google Street View dated June 19th, approaching the subject on Edmonton Street. The middle picture in front of the subject, and on the bottom of page 2, passing the subject on Edmonton Street. Top of page 3, an overhead aerial view of the subject. And the bottom of page 3, overhead aerial view facing the subject. Page 4, there's some requests for information, and there's a subject sale history, most recent being February 12th, 2015, subject that sold for $250,000. On page 5 are a list of my comparables. The comparables are located in the same region as the subject, Region 4, City Center. With comparable number 1 being in the same neighborhood, Broadway, Assiniboine. The comparables range from 1,015 square feet to 1,600 square feet of leasable area. The subject is 1,523 square feet. Other than the 260 St. Mary area, or avenue, sorry, the comparable, the subject is younger with an effective year built of 1986. The rents of the comparables range from $12 to $19 per square foot. And all the comparables have same or similar land influence of bus route and medium or heavy traffic. On page 6 is the income value summary report. I'll just run through my changes to what's on page 6 here for my recommendation. The original rent was $17.01 with a potential income of $25,906. The rent was reduced to $16.45 per square foot with a potential income of $25,053. The vacancy remains the same at 6%. The shortfall remains the same at $7 per square foot. The expenses remain the same at 3%. The net operating income is changed from $22,982 originally to $22,204. The original cap rate was 6.40%. The cap rate was adjusted to 7.05%. The original valuation was $359,000. My recommended is $315,000 rounded. Page 7, again, our cap rates information. Page 8, our Municipal Assessment Act excerpt information. And pages 9 through 14 are copies of the income and expense mailer that our department has received back. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Reimer, questions of the assessor?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. What I can say in context then is this debate now actually reduces down to rental, the potential net rental income and non-recoverable cap rate. Mr. Ducharme's actually a wee bit higher than us, so I won't spend any time on that. So Mr. Ducharme, again, thank you for your review and for the recommendation. So in this property, could I ask you, and if I could ask the board members, please, to turn to page 9 of Mr. Ducharme's submission. Now, so on page 9, this is the income statement for the 2020 submission. It appears, Mr. Ducharme, that the subject is, the gross rental income is $35,477, but after you take off the taxes and the maintenance, the net operating income is 16, just under 17,000, 16,996. We could agree that that's, on a site-specific basis, that's what they've reported, correct?
Correct.
And then turning to page 11, and I looked at this carefully, because not everyone certainly has sophisticated systems and such, and nor sort of an understanding of the terms that are included in this questionnaire. But on page 11, then, if we look in the middle, the monthly rent column, that's $1,450 a month. The reduction, there was a slight reduction in rent, as I recall, for your recommendation. Was that still then based presumably on the model, some of the model-driven factors to come in at that lower rent, as opposed to what was actually being generated?
It was, yes, more to the model.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, going back to then your page 3, just briefly, the overhead maps. So this is 77 Edmonton Street, and you show it in your pictures. That's the multifamily building that's just directly. It's all part of the sort of the same area right there, just directly to, that would be to the east of the subject. This property, this unit and that property are located south of Broadway, correct? Yeah, okay. Now, then just very briefly turning to your page 5, with that location in mind, I gather when I look at the comps that were sort of given by your systems, and this isn't a question directed at you, but I understand likely that these rent comparables were sort of generated based on the filters that you put into it. But all of these comparables are located within the central business district bounded by Broadway, Memorial, Portage, and Main Street, correct?
That'd be correct.
Okay. This may not be a fair question, Mr. Ducharme, it's fine if you don't know, but I gather the system didn't present any rent comparable information for any properties just on the periphery of it, like south of Broadway.
I was focused more sort of on the region,
Sure.
direct region. If there were, none came up.
Okay, fair answer. Then just in the last couple of questions on page 5. So again, our reference date is April 1 of 2021. Your comparables number 2 and 4, notwithstanding that they're within the central business district, those would be the 2 rental comparables closest in date to the reference date, correct?
I'm sorry, which one?
Comparables 2 and 4, 407 Graham and 428 Portage. One
Yes.
was, yeah, okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
I thank you. Linklater?
I have no questions, thank you.
I thank you. Ms. McFadden?
I don't have any further questions, thank you.
Okay. We're gonna take a break. Oh, okay.
Section?
Okay. Mr. Reimer, we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you. This is going to be happily brief. Could I ask Mr. Ducharme and the board members, please, on our main brief, to turn to page 14, please. And again, that should come up as with the heading Income Approach Summary. So what this distills to now is actually a review primarily of the market rent to be applied to the space. Mr. Ducharme's revised value includes actually a cap rate that's now higher than what we're suggesting, but notwithstanding that, I'm not changing my overall request. It all ties together, and I believe we're being fair, so I'm not going to ask the board to necessarily apply that particular cap rate, but I'm certainly asking the board to give consideration to the total valuation here. Non-recoverables, please, if you might carry forward all my previous comments. So now with respect to rental rate, what we're asking the board this afternoon is to reduce the rental rate to $11.42. Recall my question of Mr. Ducharme on the reply to the assessor's request for income information. There is a lease, and this one I do know, and can appreciate Mr. Ducharme's previous question for clarity here, I know that is fully, it's between two unrelated parties and it's fully a full market lease. The lease was dated in 2015. That's shown in both Mr. Ducharme's and my materials. So it's a 2015 lease at a net rental rate of $11.42. The gross rent looks a lot higher, but of course you've got to take off the operating cost to get to the net rent, and it translates to $11.42 a foot. That's now the single biggest difference by far in our respective calculations. So $11.42 in place for a 10-year term starting in 2015 and ending in 2025. So the question then is, okay, how does that relate to perhaps some more recent lease indicators closer to the reference date? If I could ask the parties please to turn to our page 12. Recall, Mr. Chairman, I asked Mr. Ducharme, and he's very forthright in his answer, the rental comparables that the systems provided to him based on the filters that were run didn't have any comparables outside of, just on the periphery of the central business district, which is what this is. This is, if you recall, south of Broadway at 77 Edmonton. I'm going to be very blunt. On page 12, the first index number 1, Gary Street, that is south of Broadway. If you were to run a very straight line from this unit a couple of blocks east, you would run into the unit at comparable number 1. It was negotiated in August of 2020 at a net rental rate of $12, and without question, I consider that to be our best comparable. I've suggested 11, my numbers right here, 11.42, because you could certainly argue that you could make a slight adjustment from 11.42 to $12. I would accept that. I haven't done it. I believe based on all the comparables there. Again, these are with the exception of Index 4, which is on Carlton. All of these comparables are on the periphery of the central business district and not within them, as the subject is. The average is $12.68, the median's $13. But certainly looking at the comparables, that Gary Street comp, I believe, is a very good indicator, providing some reassurance that the 1144 is at or very, very near market. So then, with that in mind, just briefly going back to page 14, we're suggesting 1142, and that drives the potential net rent of 17.4, same vacancy allowance shortfall, all the same non-recoverables for the reasons we discussed. We kept it at 5%, and a cap rate of 6.5, which we believe is appropriate based on our own cap rate study. So with that request, or that valuation in mind, we're requesting a reduction to a value of $223,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ducharme, questions of Mr. Reimer?
Yes, Mr. Reimer's requesting a value of $223,000. I guess my only question on page 4 of my brief, there was a sale that was dated February 12, 2015 for the subject at $250,000. Mr. Reimer is requesting a value less than what it sold for February 12, 2015. I'm just wondering if you could explain why you think there would be a decrease.
Actually, I can, Mr. Ducharme. Your question's a good one. Two things. A, we fundamentally, in the context, especially with the pandemic and everything I rambled on about with the cap rate study, the market changed fundamentally for office space, and the changes were perceived to be permanent, including that investor sentiment survey I talked about where they're projecting capitalization rate increases. So that, as your cap rate, and you'll be very well aware of this, as your cap rate goes up, the value of the property goes down. So that's the first part of the question. Then if the board members, if I can ask the board members and Mr. Ducharme to turn to page 4. And this is sort of illustrative of what I was talking about even prior to the pandemic. So Mr. Ducharme, and again, I agree your question is a very good one because it looks certainly a little odd when you've got a purchase price from previous years that is higher than the assessment. But if you look at what's happening here, the property sold 3 years before that for $280,000. Now it's gone down to $250,000 in 2015, so it's gone down $30,000. And to be clear, those conditions I talked about with the pandemic and all the uncertainty around the office sector, I'm suggesting that absolutely would drive a further decrease. So your point is well taken, but I certainly believe our materials and evidence fully justify that further depth from 2015 until the reference date of April 21.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Linklater?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
Just for clarification, did I hear you say that the actual rent according to the sheet two was 1142 in 2015?
It's a lease that commenced in 2015 and it's a 10-year term. So yes, that's exactly right. It's a 2015.
No.
Oh no, it's on the main floor.
No,
Oh, sorry.
there's no escalator.
Oh, there's no step-ups. No, there's no step-ups that I'm aware of. Good question. No. I'm not aware of any anyway. I'm going from the income and expense form that I've got there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Either party wants summation?
No, thank you.
All right, we have to have a 5-minute break
Okay.
for 10 minutes.
Can I suggest one thing?
Yeah.
The next matter, I'm asking for a 54-1 confirmation because
All
of some.
right.
It's up to you if you want to break or
Yes, that's fine. Somebody has to move their car.
okay.
So we can do that, okay?
Okay.
So let's go on to the next property, which is 311 Hargrave, Unit 101.
Mr. Chairman, we're asking for this assessment based on some brief discussions Mr. Ducharme and I have had and my review. We're asking for a 54-1 confirmation at this time. Thank you.
In view of the time, I think we can dispense with that and just treat it as the request from the applicant. Mr. Ducharme, are you okay with that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
We're seeking just confirmation.
Okay.
Okay.
Of the non-compliance, is that?
No, of the present assessment. We're just asking for it to be.
Was there a non-compliance issue here?
There's non-compliance and there's an area.
So
difference.
you're not rebutting the,
I'm not responding to that, just asking.
so you're okay then
Yes,
with everything?
I believe so.
All right. I think that concludes your part, Mr. Reimer. Results very soon.
Thank you.
So thank you. Mr. Ducharme, I think we have covered off everything on the scheduled docket, and therefore this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you kindly.